Bloodborne pathogens make people afraid. Although we need to protect ourselves from exposure, we don't need to be fearful. There are a lot of myths about diseases caused by exposure to blood, and most of these myths are just that, myths. The truth is we do need to have a healthy respect for bloodborne pathogens, but you shouldn't overreact, and there certainly is no need to panic. You can help an injured student or coworker and keep yourself and everyone else safe from disease transmission.
Okay, pinch your nose and I'll get my gloves and we'll go to the nurse, okay?
Let's start with a few definitions. Bloodborne pathogens are microorganisms in the blood capable of transmitting disease. You might also hear someone mention OPIM. OPIM stands for Other Potentially Infectious Materials. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome and results from HIV. Hepatitis is an infection of the liver. There are different types of hepatitis, which we will learn about later. Now that we have an idea of what we're talking about, we can discuss what we need to do to stay safe. Originally, the intent of regulations to protect people from bloodborne pathogens came from the medical industry. These employees routinely worked with blood from injured and ill people, and while infections rarely occurred, those that did occurred in nurses who had been accidentally stuck with a used needle. So, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, came up with the bloodborne pathogen standard. This law required that people who have routine exposure to bloodborne pathogens start protecting themselves from bloodborne diseases. Now, most people who work for the Wichita Public Schools rarely come in contact with blood and body fluids in the workplace, but occasionally you may find yourself in a situation where you could be exposed. If that happens, there are some simple rules to remember. Always keep a barrier between you and blood or body fluid. That may be as simple as using gloves, or using an apron, goggles, or a face shield. Just remember not to touch blood or other body fluids with your bare hands. Never reach into a barrel to compact trash or use your hands to compress trash. Wash your hands. Your mom told you that all the time. When you're finished with your gloves, take them off. We'll show you how later. And go wash your hands with soap and water. It's about that easy. All you have to do is use common sense and follow the rules. The district has an exposure control plan, which adds detail to these simple rules, and which we'll discuss later. But first, let's talk about how bloodborne diseases are spread. There are several ways in which bloodborne pathogens can enter the body. First is through a cut in the skin. This is probably the most common way in the work environment. Bloodborne pathogens can enter the body through a splash into the nose, eyes, or mouth. This is called mucous membrane exposure. Bloodborne diseases are also spread by sexual contact with an infected person, or by sharing a needle with an infected person. Lastly, bloodborne diseases can be passed from a mother to her child before or during birth, or while breastfeeding. There are many different kinds of bloodborne diseases, but today we're concerned with three. The first is called HIV. HIV attacks the body's immune system. There are few signs of the disease in the early stages, and it can progress and cause AIDS. There is currently no vaccination to prevent HIV. HIV is a relatively new disease, and we're still learning about the virus. But what we do know is this disease is not easy to transmit. HIV does not live outside the human body. That is why mosquitoes don't transmit HIV, and why the disease is relatively tough to catch in the workplace. The bad news is that until the disease advances to full-blown AIDS, you can't tell who is infected. That's why it's a mistake when people say, well, they don't look like they have AIDS, or they don't look sick. You just can't tell who may be infected, so we have to use protection whenever we're in a situation where we may be exposed to HIV. Next, we'll look at hepatitis, which affects the liver. It is important to understand that there are different types of hepatitis. Hepatitis A is not a bloodborne disease and can be transmitted by relatively casual contact. The forms of hepatitis we are concerned with today are hepatitis B and C, both of which are bloodborne diseases. Hepatitis B, called HBV, has been around for many years. There is a vaccine for hepatitis B that has been very successful in preventing this disease. Hepatitis B is easier to catch than HIV, up to 100 times easier. There are several reasons for this. Hepatitis B exists in much greater quantities in the blood, and unlike HIV, can live outside the human body on surfaces. If reliquefied, it can last for about 7 days outside the human body. Hepatitis B is a disease that infects the liver. It can be a lifelong infection that can lead to cirrhosis of the liver, liver cancer, or liver failure and death. 2 to 6% of people over the age of 5 exposed to hepatitis B develop what is called chronic infection. In the U.S., about 1.25 million people have chronic hepatitis B infections. About 5,000 people a year die in the United States from chronic hepatitis B. The best thing to do is to make certain you don't get exposed to the virus, and if you do, get the immunization for hepatitis B. This immunization works even after exposure. Now let's look at another type of hepatitis, this one called hepatitis C, or HCV, for hepatitis C virus. Like HBV, HCV affects the liver. And like HBV, it can live outside the body for at least 16 hours at room temperature. Hepatitis C is likewise a long-term disease. The long-term infection by hepatitis C occurs in 55 to 85% of the people infected. 70% develop chronic liver disease, while 5 to 20% end up with cirrhosis of the liver in 20 to 30 years, and 1 to 5% die from the long-term infection. Unlike HBV, there is no vaccine for HCV, so the best thing that you can do is prevent exposure. So now that we know the dangers of these diseases, how do we protect ourselves without undue fear? By following a series of things that will help keep you safe. These basic rules are known as universal precautions. Since blood is the single most important source of bloodborne infections, assume that all blood or body fluids containing visible blood may carry an infectious agent. That means you should always wear disposable gloves and discard them after use. The best way to remove gloves and keep yourself safe is by removing one glove at a time. Grab one glove near the cuff. Peel it down until it comes off inside out. Cup the loose glove in the palm of the gloved hand. Now place 2 fingers of your bare hand inside the cuff of the remaining glove. Peel that glove down so it also comes off inside out and over the first glove. You may then dispose of the gloves in a red biohazard bag. Remember to wash your hands with soap and water thoroughly. If soap and water are not available, then you may use an antiseptic hand cleanser such as an alcohol gel. There are many brands on the market. Just make certain they are germicidal. When a sink becomes available, then you may wash your hands. That's it. Simple, right? But you've taken a huge step toward preventing a life-threatening disease. For those who provide health care in our schools, such as school nurses and select office personnel, remember that you are not to bend or recap needles. If possible, use self-capping needles or dispose needles directly in a sharps container. Sharps containers are available from the nurse or environmental group in your building. If you use a needle, do not leave it out where you or others may be exposed by being stuck. If recapping is required, use the one-hand technique. Another process control to ensure safety deals with the trash. Don't ever use your hands, even with gloves on, to compress the trash down. Use a tool or don't compress the trash at all. If someone had put a needle in this trash, this person could be the victim of needle stick. If she's lucky, that'll be the end of it and she won't get a deadly disease. But in any case, she will have to go to the doctor, have one or more shots, and then be tested regularly for HIV and hepatitis. It just isn't worth it for a quick trash mash. Good housekeeping procedures are smart ways to prevent disease transmission. Just be sure to work smart. Always wear gloves, and you can even wear leather gloves over rubber gloves. Use eye protection when cleaning spills or when there's a chance of splashing blood into your eyes. Use absorbent powder or towels for liquid spills, and then disinfect the area with an EPA-registered spray or cleanser. Be certain that you never pick up broken glass with your hands. Always use a dustpan and broom. You can put the contaminated glass in a sharps container or disinfect it with germicidal cleanser. That's about it. Using some common sense and some not so common sense, avoiding the diseases we talked about earlier is not that difficult. For more guidance, you can examine the USD 259 Exposure Control Plan. It's available online, or you can ask your supervisor to get it for you. Finally, let's take a look at what would happen if you're ever unfortunate enough to have an exposure incident. If you are injured, let your supervisor know immediately. If you suspect there is a risk of exposure, let him or her know right away. Your supervisor will contact risk management, or you can call them. You will be referred for medical treatment and follow-up. The healthcare providers you will be referred to know the procedures to follow if you are exposed. They will evaluate your injury and then determine the best course of treatment for you. They will also offer counseling and immunizations at that time. All you have to do is make sure you follow up, have the testing done, and take all medicine that may be given to you. If you have not had the hepatitis B vaccine, it will be given to you at that time. The Wichita Public Schools will provide the hepatitis B vaccine to school nurses, custodians, elementary school clerks and secretaries with health-related responsibilities, health occupation employees, and employees at certain locations before any exposure occurs. The hepatitis vaccine will also be made available to any employee who has an occupational exposure. That's it. You've made yourself safer and kept others from being exposed to potentially life-threatening diseases. Remember, don't panic, but do respect that many of these diseases have no cure. If we do that, we should be able to keep all our employees and students safe.